Okay, let's look at the last one, which is our unmount phase. So inside of our unmount phase, all that happens is component will unmount gets called. This is where we want to do anything before React strips the component off of our DOM. So for example, we in our app.js decide whether or not to show our lifecycles component based on whether or not showChild is true or false, right, on our app.js state. Now, if setState gets called and this property changes, React re-renders, and then it realizes that it no longer needs to render our lifecycle component because, for example, this is now false. We don't want to show it anymore. React will then start going through the unmount phase for the lifecycle component because our lifecycle component is on the page right now. It's there, it's mounted, right? So when we toggle it and React goes through its lifecycle method where it checks and it calls its render inside of our app component and it sees that, oh, I'm not rendering this anymore. Then React's like, okay, let's go into this component we're no longer mounting and let's call component will unmount in case there's anything it needs to do before I remove it from the DOM, right? And that's what we'll see. When we click toggle, we see that component will unmount gets called and then it gets removed. And then when we toggle it back, it goes through the usual mount phase because it's remounting. So it's putting it back. The whole cycle starts all over again. But in this unmount, this is where we want to clean up our component. If there's anything regarding our component that might need some tidying up. And this usually has to do with if we want to remove anything that might be a memory leak, which just means that there's some leftover code that the computer doesn't need to be aware of, that the garbage collection can't access, which just uses up excess memory inside of our browser that it doesn't need to. We won't really explore this part until later when we actually look at Firebase. But for now, just know that this is a lifecycle method that we do have access to when React goes through its render phase and realizes, oh, whatever's already here, I don't need anymore. Let me unmount it. Then component will unmount gets called. And this is the last lifecycle method because once our component is off the page, there's nothing else. It doesn't exist as far as the DOM is concerned anymore. So this is probably the easiest one to understand, right? But how we're going to use all of these lifecycle methods in our React development will be fundamental in understanding how to best structure our code. I know this was definitely a lot of theoretical stuff, but it's very important for us to understand all of this before we move forward. So thank you for your patience, and let's continue with the course.